My husband drenched me in wine. The words still sting, echoing in my head like a cruel chorus. He tilted the glass with a smirk, letting the crimson liquid pour over my carefully styled hair and down my blouse. In that instant, humiliation burned hotter than the alcohol seeping into my skin. My daughter-in-law's sharp laugh and my granddaughter's high-pitched giggle joined in chorus, turning my pain into their entertainment. Somewhere inside me, a warning stirred, a sense that tonight would not end with laughter alone. Silence pressed down for a heartbeat, then shattered under their mocking amusement. My hands trembled as I dabbed at my face with a napkin, the cloth soaking red like an unspoken accusation. 43 years of marriage, yet this was my place, an object of ridicule at the very table I had once dreamed would host warmth and respect. Across the room, the clock ticked steadily, each sound reminding me that time had not been kind to my sacrifices. But time, as I would soon learn, also carried secrets hidden deep within dusty envelopes. Lisa, my daughter-in-law, leaned back as though she had triumphed in some private war. She whispered something into her daughter's ear, and together they erupted in another wave of laughter. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but my throat felt tight, bound by decades of swallowed words. My granddaughter scrolled her phone again, her attention already drifting away from me as if I were irrelevant. Perhaps they thought I would remain silent forever, but something in the air told me silence would not hold tonight. The smell of Cabernet clung stubbornly to my skin, mingling with the scent of roasted meat and garlic from the dinner I had spent hours preparing. The table gleamed with wedding china I had guarded for decades, pieces chosen when hope still lived in my heart. My husband, Robert, tossed back another swallow of beer, dismissing me with nothing more than a shake of his head. He had always believed he alone carried the weight of our family's world, yet soon he would discover how fragile his supposed dominion really was. I rose from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood. For the first time in years, the sound felt liberating rather than embarrassing. Lisa's laughter faltered when she saw the steadiness in my eyes, though her lips still curved. Somewhere inside, a dormant part of me stirred awake, whispering that dignity once lost could still be reclaimed, and that whisper was stronger than Robert's laughter behind me. I sat in the car parked by the grocery store, staring blankly through the windshield. The smell of wine still clung, as if the humiliation refused to release me. My phone buzzed, his name glowing on the screen. For a moment, hope flickered. Was it an apology? But Robert's voice held no remorse, only urgency. "You need to come home. 3 men are here asking for you. They're lawyers. They're talking about the house." I froze. Lawyers? For me? My humiliation had barely dried, and already the night was weaving a darker thread. I hung up without answering. My hands gripped the steering wheel, cold sweat forming on my palms. For decades, I had trusted Robert with everything: papers, payments, decisions that shaped our lives. I had believed peace was worth the price of surrender. Now, strangers were in my home asking for me, not him. What secrets could lie buried beneath 4 decades of silence? And why did I feel more fear than surprise? Perhaps deep down, I had always known there were truths Robert never wanted me to uncover. The second call came quickly, his voice sharper now, tinged with panic instead of authority. "Dorothy, come home right now. They're saying the house has been in your name since 1980. That can't be true. I bought this house." His words struck like a thunderclap. My house? My name? The humiliation of wine on my skin suddenly seemed trivial compared to this revelation. I turned off the phone and sat back in my seat. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe without his shadow suffocating me. As the night deepened, I drove back slowly, every street lamp casting long shadows that seemed to whisper promises of change. When I turned onto our block, I saw the sedan in the driveway, sleek and unfamiliar. Through the window, 3 men in dark suits stood stiffly, papers in hand, while Robert paced like a caged animal. I stopped at the curb, staring at the house that had held my entire adult life. Something inside me shifted. This was not just brick and wood. This was history, inheritance, and dignity. Admired the salary and the title. He praised the firm more than the person. I listened for a place to enter and found none. Katie said the private school felt fine. She did not elaborate. She did not need to. My questions lingered at the rim of my teacup and cooled with the liquid. Robert mentioned the heating bill. He always did in winter. The number was never neutral. It arrived like a verdict. He adjusted the thermostat with a speech about responsibility. Lisa agreed on principle. She liked principles when they protected her comfort. I remembered quilts my mother stitched by hand. Warmth measured in patience, not figures. I did not say it. Robert cut into the roast and announced it slightly dry. The knife scraped porcelain and something inside me. Katie laughed at something on her phone. The screen flashed a filter that made faces brighter and thinner. Lisa leaned in, sharing the frame, angling for the good side. Mother and daughter mirrored lips and lifted brows until they matched. It felt like watching a rehearsal for a play where I did not have a role. Robert smiled at the laughter without asking why. He liked the sound, not the joke. He liked proof of a tribe he could still lead. I tried to introduce a story about the recipe. It came from a neighbor who once traded roses for sugar. The memory tasted like summer. Lisa nodded at the first sentence and put down the nod before the second. Tradition is lovely, she said, locking the word like a lid. We could have ordered takeout. Robert agreed that simple was best. He glanced at the sink and at my hands. Efficiency disguised as care. Efficiency that erased hands. Katie asked for more mashed potatoes without looking up. I passed them. Her thank you was a whisper to the plate. She used the same tone she used with voice commands. I wondered when she stopped running across the yard to meet me. Maybe at 13. Maybe when she learned to measure value by speed. I pictured her small hands sticky with jam at my kitchen counter years ago. Jam and laughter. We wiped both with the same towel. We never worried about rings. Lisa suggested repainting their kitchen in a color called fog. She wanted marble that photographs well. She had a list of fixtures named after. Set it down to keep from trembling. Robert began his small complaints parade. The meat, the temperature, the number of dishes. Each remark wore a familiar uniform. He spoke as if he were steward of a ship and I was ocean weather that should comply. Lisa laughed in the tone of support. Katie recorded the dog sleeping and posted it with a caption about family night. My humiliation did not yet have wine. It already had witnesses. It had a script that left no lines for apology. I asked what they were laughing at. My voice sounded softer than I felt. Robert said it was a generational thing. Lisa agreed, like a judge affirming a ruling. I felt heat rise under my collar. I decided to try again. Try me, I said. The words were small, but they were mine. Robert reached for the wine. He could have lifted it to drink. He could have set it down. He poured. The room fell still, long enough to hear my life split. Laughter came back quickly, sharper now. Lisa wiped a tear. Katie hid a smile. Robert chuckled like a man who had made a point. I dabbed my face and stood. The chair complained across the floor. I walked to the closet for my purse. I did not raise my voice. I did not plead. I recognized the scene. I had performed it for years with fewer props. At the door, air reached me with a clean touch. Somewhere outside, a gate clicked open. The night air steadied me. The porch light drew moths that kept faith with brightness. My garden held the day's last color. I walked to the car and sat with my hands on the wheel. The phone lit with Robert's name. He spoke of strangers in suits. He said they were asking for me and for the house. Urgency replaced his laugh. I ended the call and looked back at our windows. Shadows moved inside like actors taking places. What document waits under our roof, and whose name does it carry? The knock at dignity came in suits. 3 men stepped into the living room with folders that looked too heavy for their slim hands. Their shoes shined against the worn rug I had chosen 30 years ago. Robert tried to shield the space with his bulk, but they asked only for me. My name, not his, filled the air. Jonathan Blackwood, the eldest, spoke carefully, as though reading lines rehearsed for decades. Mrs. Patterson, we've been trying to reach you. We have documents concerning this property. As a tenant. Tenant. The word dropped like a verdict in court. Lisa appeared in the doorway, her smile trembling. Katie finally looked up from her phone, interest sparking where mockery had lived minutes before. Their certainty cracked. The stage tilted. Robert's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. Impossible. I bought this house. I built this life. Jonathan's reply was merciless. No, sir. Your wife's inheritance built this life. Memory stirred inside me. The accident, my parents gone, the Ohio house sold under Robert's management. I had been too lost in grief and motherhood to see details. They had protected me even then, ensuring their legacy flowed through my hands alone. The lawyers explained how every improvement, the kitchen remodel, the new roof, even the basement workshop, was funded from my trust. Robert had lived as captain of a ship he never owned. He looked at me, horror dawning, but also fear. Power shifted with each word Jonathan read aloud. The mini twist came with a manila envelope. Jonathan held it gently, as though it pulsed with breath. This is to be opened only if you face disrespect in your own home. My father's handwriting, unmistakable, stared back at me. Disrespect. The wine in my hair had not yet dried, but it had already written the condition. Robert's laugh came brittle. Dorothy isn't disrespected. We had a small disagreement. His words collapsed under the weight of the napkin still stained red on the table. For once, everyone knew the truth, and he could not bury it. Lisa stepped forward, her voice sugar-coated. We were only trying to help Michael. Refinancing, exploring options. For the family. Her attempt at charm cracked as the documents contradicted her story. She looked at me, eyes sharp with calculation. You wouldn't use this against us. We're family. Family. The word rang hollow. I remembered laughter at my humiliation. I remembered silence when respect was needed. Family had been invoked as shield, never as gift. The room pulsed with a silence heavier than noise, each of them waiting for me to decide who I was. My heart pounded, yet calm spread through my voice. Why are you here now? I asked the lawyers. Mr. Chen adjusted his glasses. Truth feels like trespass. I realized he had mistaken control for care, and now the control was slipping. His hands gripped the arm of the sofa as though force could hold back ink and law. His knuckles whitened, but no grip could bind paper older than Katie's life. The room swirled between past and present. The china plates, the laughter, the spilled wine all seemed staged to highlight this unveiling. Robert demanded to know where the money had gone. The answer was cruel in its precision. The mortgage was satisfied in 1987. Since then, every payment he made had flowed into escrow, compounded with interest. $450,000 sat waiting, a fortune hidden in plain sight. Lisa gasped. Katie whispered, "Grandma owns everything?" Her words, simple and sharp, cut deeper than Robert's roar. Yes, I did. I always had. Jonathan closed the folder with finality. Mrs. Patterson, you are the sole owner. Every attempt to alter that requires only your consent. Robert slumped, a general defeated not by war, but by truth. Lisa bit her lip, fighting to spin the story into something survivable. Katie sat still, phone forgotten. The house, once his stage, had shifted its spotlight. It rested on me, soaked in wine but steadied by inheritance and law. For the first time in decades, the air smelled not of shame, but of possibility. What lay inside that sealed envelope waited for my hands. Robert paced the living room like a man hunting for escape in a cage built by his own hands. His shoulders hunched, his breath came shallow. He jabbed his finger at the folder on the coffee table as if sheer anger could erase the words inked on its pages. I made those payments every month for decades. How can you say I don't own this house? His voice cracked, less fury than fear. Jonathan Blackwood remained calm, a lighthouse against the storm. You did make payments, Mr. Patterson, but you paid as a tenant. The house was yours, Mrs. Patterson, from the very beginning. The word tenant echoed across walls that had heard 4 decades of arguments, birthdays, and silent meals. Tenant. Robert stumbled backward into his chair as if the rug had been yanked beneath him. Robert's jaw slackened. $450,000. Money he thought he had sacrificed. Money he believed he had earned was in truth accumulating beneath his blind stewardship, untouched and waiting. The mini-twist arrived like a blade. Robert realized aloud, I've been pouring money into an account, not mine? His words stumbled. Mr. Chen nodded with clinical detachment. Correct. An account secured for Mrs. Patterson's sole benefit. Your efforts have enlarged her assets, not your own. The humiliation Robert had inflicted with a glass of wine was now returned with ledgers and receipts. I watched his confidence collapse, brick by brick, until only bewilderment remained. He had mocked me for being irrelevant, yet the numbers proved he was the guest in my house all along. Lisa tried to salvage ground, her voice pitched high with persuasion. Dorothy, listen, this doesn't change anything. We've all lived here together, shared holidays, birthdays. You wouldn't push us out now, not after all this time. Her words rang hollow, her eyes calculating the sum in the air. She was no longer defending Robert. She was defending access to a house, to security, to wealth she had never imagined belonged to me. Katie looked between us, confusion in her young face, as if she were seeing me not as a grandmother but as someone with unshakable power. Robert's defenses grew desperate. He demanded proof of every detail. Mr. Blackwood obliged, producing receipts for renovations. The kitchen remodel in 1995, funded by my inheritance portfolio. The new roof in 2003, again from the trust. Even the basement workshop Robert had claimed as his domain had been paid with my parents' legacy. Impossible, Robert muttered, but conviction had left his voice. Each receipt was a nail, each document another lock on a truth he could no longer control. He had been custodian, never master. The house itself testified against him. I sat straighter, the sting of wine drying in my hair replaced by something steadier. For the first time, I looked at Robert not as my husband, but as a man who had lived off my silence. He had called himself protector, yet the record showed doesn't know how to handle this. She never handled finances. His words, once binding, now sounded pitifully small. I felt something uncoil inside me, a knot loosened by truth. 43 years of being told I didn't understand, of being silenced with patronizing smiles, had led to this night. The lawyers' voices confirmed what my parents had ensured long ago, that my dignity would not vanish under someone else's control. Lisa's smile collapsed into a grimace. Katie whispered again, softer this time. Grandma, it's really yours? I met her eyes. Yes, sweetheart. It always has been. The clock ticked once more, but now it sounded like possibility, not judgment. Robert buried his face in his hands. Lisa turned her gaze toward him, eyes sharp with blame. The family that had laughed minutes earlier now sat fractured, exposed, powerless. I leaned back, the envelope still unopened on the table, knowing its weight would carry more than even this revelation. The house, the money, the trust, all pointed to a truth Robert could not refute. He had never been master. He had been tenant, and tenants, no matter how long they linger, eventually must face eviction. The night was only beginning, and their reckoning had just arrived. The manila envelope sat between us like a silent witness. Jonathan placed it gently on the table, its edges worn, its seal unbroken since my parents' hands prepared it. "Mrs. Patterson," he said softly, "your father wrote this with explicit instructions. It was to be opened only if you ever felt disrespected in your own home." My breath caught. Disrespected. The word pierced deeper than wine dripping down my hair. Robert shifted uncomfortably, laughter bubbling weakly in his throat. "Dorothy isn't disrespected. We just had a little spat." The napkin stained red with Cabernet told another story. Jonathan slid the envelope toward me. My fingers hesitated above it, trembling not from weakness but from the gravity of choice. For decades, I had been the silent half of this marriage. Tonight, silence had ended. Lisa's voice broke the tension. "Surely this isn't necessary. We can resolve this as a family. Paperwork isn't stronger than marriage." Her words tasted of fear. She feared what lay inside, because replaced with something fierce, the taste of vindication. Robert leapt to his feet. 30 days? That's insane! I've lived here 43 years. You can't just erase that. His voice cracked, panic dripping through. Lisa rushed to stand beside him, a united front against me. "Dorothy, think carefully. Where will Frank go? Where will Katie and I live when we visit? You're not really going to enforce this, are you?" Their fear did not move me. For years, I had been cornered by their laughter, diminished by their words. Tonight, the corner had dissolved. Tonight, the house's walls echoed my name. The mini twist came from Mr. Martinez. "Mr. Patterson," he said firmly, "our records also show that your wife's trust covered your so-called mortgage payments, which means the $450,000 escrow belongs solely to her. If she invokes the clause, you not only lose residence, but also access to that account." Robert's knees seemed to buckle. His empire, built on illusion, had collapsed in 2 sentences. Lisa's face paled. She turned to me, desperation edging her voice. "Dorothy, you can't do this. Family sticks together." Family, the same word she had weaponized while laughing at my shame. I looked at the man I had once loved, the man who had poured wine over my head without hesitation. "You told me I had nothing to contribute, that I wouldn't understand. But the truth is, I was never the guest here, Robert. You were." His face crumpled, eyes darting toward the lawyers, begging for an ally. None came. Katie, voice small, asked, "Does this mean Grandpa has to leave?" Her question hung in the air. For once, it wasn't mine to answer with deference. It was mine to answer with authority. "I haven't decided yet," I said quietly, my voice carrying more weight than a shout ever could. "But understand this. I will no longer accept humiliation in my own home. If the dignity clause exists, it's because my parents knew this day might come. And it has." Robert tried again, desperation fraying his words. "You don't know what you're doing." No longer negotiable. 30 days is written here. Not by me, but by those who loved me enough to see the truth. If I choose, those days begin now. Robert opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. Lisa clenched her jaw, her silence louder than any insult. Katie's gaze followed me as I walked toward the stairs, the paper still clutched in my hand. Her eyes held both fear and something else. Respect, perhaps, or awe. At the threshold of my bedroom, I turned back. I will no longer be invisible in my own house. This home has my name on it. From this moment forward, it has my voice, too. The words hung in the air, reverberating against walls that had ignored me for too long. The lawyers gathered their papers, their work complete. Robert's face crumpled. Lisa's mask cracked. And Katie's silence carried more weight than any laugh she had ever given. I closed the door behind me, knowing the house itself had shifted. For once, it belonged to me. The backlash came quietly at first, like whispers carried down a hallway. 2 days after the envelope was opened, Robert stopped pleading with me directly. Instead, Lisa's calls multiplied. Her tone changed from sugar to steel. "Dorothy, we need to talk. Michael is worried. You're making rash decisions, throwing away decades of stability." She framed it as concern, but beneath the surface lurked accusation. That evening, Jonathan called to warn me. "Mrs. Patterson, your husband and daughter-in-law have filed a petition questioning your competency. They intend to argue you're incapable of managing your own affairs." My hands stiffened around the receiver. After all these years of silencing me, now they sought to erase my voice altogether. The words sank heavy. Competency. The implication stung more than the wine. It wasn't enough that Robert had ridiculed me, or that Lisa had laughed at my humiliation. Now they wanted the courts to declare me unfit, to strip away the legal strength my parents had left me. Robert's voice echoed in memory. "You don't understand money. You never did." Those dismissals had always been weapons of control. This petition was simply their sharpest blade yet. For a moment, doubt trembled in my chest. Unannounced, her perfume announcing her before her voice. "Dorothy, darling, surely you don't want some stranger evaluating you. Let us handle this within the family." Her smile was all performance, her eyes full of calculation. "Frank, Robert, only wants what's best." I met her gaze evenly. If that were true, he wouldn't have poured wine on my head. If that were true, he wouldn't question my mind because I finally spoke. For once, she faltered. For once, her practiced ease cracked. And in that crack, I glimpsed fear. The mini twist came when Michael called. My son's voice, distant yet familiar, carried both concern and disbelief. "Mom, Lisa says you're being manipulated by lawyers. Dad's worried sick. They say you don't understand what you're doing." His words cut deeper than Robert's ever had. My own child echoing their narrative. I answered calmly. "Michael, did you know I paid for your tuition from my trust? Did you know the house has been mine all along?" Silence followed, his world colliding with truths he'd never questioned. "That doesn't sound right," he whispered. For him, as for his father, ignorance had been a form of comfort. The day of the evaluation arrived. I wore a navy suit I had once purchased for a wedding, but never worn because Robert told me it was too much. The fabric felt strong against my skin, as if it carried the weight of all my unsaid words. Dr. Steinberg's office was lined with books, the air warm and calm. He smiled kindly as I entered. "Mrs. Patterson, shall we begin?" For 3 hours, he tested my memory, my reasoning, my understanding of law and finance. I answered with clarity I hadn't realized I still possessed. Each question became a chance to prove to myself what I had long been denied. At one point, he asked me to explain the trust documents. My hands shook slightly as I spoke, but my words were steady. My parents left their legacy to me, not my husband. They wanted to ensure I was protected. That protection includes this house and the funds that have accumulated. His brow lifted with respect. "And do you understand the petition your confirmed Dr. Steinberg's report would crush their petition. Robert and Lisa's attempt to discredit me had backfired. Yet their betrayal weighed heavy. They hadn't apologized for laughter or wine or decades of dismissal. Instead, they had tried to erase my very capacity to choose. I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen Robert once called too cluttered, and brewed tea for myself. The steam rose in soft spirals, each wisp reminding me that clarity can emerge even after years of fog. The petition had not weakened me, it had sharpened me, but their counterattack was not finished. Jonathan's voice on the phone warned me. They'll likely seek a compromise meeting. Expect persuasion, threats, maybe guilt. Stand firm. I hung up and looked around the house that was legally, financially, spiritually mine. Every corner spoke of years I had endured quietly. Now those same walls held witness to my awakening. Yet beneath my calm, a new question brewed. How far would Robert and Lisa go to keep their grip? The answer, I suspected, was waiting just beyond the next door I would have to open. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and dust, a place where truth was supposed to shine but often dimmed beneath arguments. I sat at the long oak table, hands folded in my lap, the paper of Dr. Steinberg's report heavy in front of me. Robert entered with Lisa at his side, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as though to punctuate her confidence. He looked worn, gray around the edges, but still carried himself like a man expecting control to return at any moment. They had filed to strip me of my voice. Today, that attempt would unravel. Dr. Steinberg sat across from me, his expression calm, his presence steady. When called to the stand, he adjusted his glasses and began without hesitation. Mrs. Patterson demonstrates full capacity in every measure we applied. Memory, comprehension, financial reasoning, judgment. In fact, she displayed remarkable resilience and clarity given the circumstances of her family conflict. His words flowed like balm over wounds I had carried for years. Lisa's smile faltered, her fingers tightening around her pen. Robert shifted in his seat, his jaw clenching. For once, he could not interrupt, could not redefine the narrative. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, leaned forward. Doc, even manipulation by these lawyers might temporarily mask deeper cognitive decline. Dorothy has been under pressure. Steinberg did not flinch. Stress can impair judgment briefly, yes, but Mrs. Patterson's performance was consistent across multiple sessions, with no evidence of decline. Furthermore, her insight into her family dynamics and her legal protections was unusually sharp. If anything, the so-called pressure clarified her thinking. Lisa's cheeks colored. Her attempt to plant doubt had wilted under his precision. The mini twist arrived when Robert himself insisted on speaking. He stood abruptly, voice trembling but loud. This is absurd. Dorothy doesn't even know how to write a check. I've handled everything for 43 years. She's always been simple. His words hung in the air, both cruel and desperate. I felt my face flush. But before shame could creep in, the judge's gavel struck. Mr. Patterson, sit down. Your statement reflects control, not evidence. His outburst, meant to weaken me, had exposed the very abuse Steinberg had named. For the first time, the court saw him not as protector, but oppressor. Jonathan leaned close, whispering, "He just proved our case." He was right. Robert's attempt to silence me had revealed the decades-long pattern. The judge's gaze softened when it turned back to me. Mrs. Patterson, do you wish to say anything? My throat tightened, but I forced the words out, steady and clear. For years, I believed silence was peace. I let him speak for me. But tonight, after humiliation in front of my family, I learned silence is not peace. It is erasure, and I will not be erased. The courtroom shifted, as though the very air recognized the weight of truth. Dr. Steinberg's report was entered into record. The petition to declare me incompetent was denied with sharp finality. Mrs. Patterson retains full authority over her home, her finances, and her decisions, the judge declared. Robert slumped into his chair, eyes hollow. Lisa scribbled furiously on her legal pad, though the ink could not rewrite the ruling. Katie, sitting in the back row, looked between us all with eyes wide, her phone forgotten. Spread the documents across the quilt I had stitched years ago. My father's handwriting, Steinberg's signature, the judge's ruling, all formed a tapestry of proof. I was not invisible. I was not incompetent. I was not erased. Outside my door, the house breathed differently. No longer his fortress, It was my sanctuary. And yet, beneath the relief, tension coiled. I had won this battle. But the war for my dignity was not over. Robert and Lisa would not retreat quietly. Their silence tonight was not surrender. It was strategy. I closed the folder and placed it carefully back into the drawer. Tomorrow they would come again. Tomorrow they would spin new words, new manipulations. But tonight, as the clock struck midnight, I allowed myself one rare luxury: peace. Real peace, not silence, not erasure. Peace born of a voice finally heard. My father's protection had met my own resolve, and together they had carried me through. Yet, in the stillness, one question lingered like a shadow at the foot of my bed. What price would they demand next for the dignity I refused to surrender? The living room looked almost staged when I walked in that evening. Robert sat in his usual chair, though his posture was different, less commanding, more desperate. Lisa perched on the edge of the sofa, her blouse crisp, her expression carefully composed. Katie sat cross-legged on the floor, unusually quiet, eyes darting between us as though sensing the gravity of what was coming. For decades, I had been a silent guest in this house. Tonight, I entered as its rightful owner, though the weight of that truth pressed heavily in the air. Robert stood when he saw me. His voice cracked but tried for authority. "Dorothy, thank you for coming home." I corrected him gently but firmly. "I'm visiting, Robert. This isn't your home." The words cut the room in half. Lisa leaned forward quickly, smoothing her skirt as though to contain the tension. "Please, let's not be adversarial. We all want the same thing. Stability, security. We're family." The word family sounded hollow from her lips, more negotiation tactic than truth. They wasted no time presenting their offer. Lisa spoke as though she had rehearsed it. "We'd like you to add Robert's name to..." The wine dripping down my face, their laughter like knives, and the way Robert had tried to erase me with a petition for incompetence. A promise to be more respectful was ash compared to the decades of dismissal I had endured. I set my purse on the side table and looked at them one by one. What if I say no? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lisa's smile froze, then sharpened. "Dorothy, think carefully. If you force us out, you'll be completely alone. No family, no support system. What happens when you get sick? When you actually need us?" Her words dripped with threat, disguised as concern. Robert tried another angle. "We've been married 43 years. Doesn't that count for something? Don't I deserve a chance to make it right?" The mini twist came, not from them, but from me. I felt a strange calm as I spoke. "You've had 43 years to make it right. I begged for respect in 1,000 small ways, and you ignored every one. You laughed as you poured wine over my head. You tried to strip me of my mind in court. And now you want my signature to secure your comfort. No, Robert. No, Lisa. This house has always been mine. And now my voice will be, too." Their faces shifted. Robert's collapsing into shock. Lisa's twisting into anger. Katie looked stricken, torn between loyalty and awakening. Lisa's composure cracked. She rose, her voice sharp. "Fine, Dorothy. If this is how you want it, then don't come crying to us when you realize what you've thrown away. You're choosing walls and paint over family." I stood, my coat draped over my arm, my purse already in hand. "No, Lisa. I'm choosing dignity. You mistake endurance for love, control for care, and silence for peace. I won't make that mistake anymore." Robert tried to reach for me, but his hand trembled, and I stepped back. I turned at the doorway. One last look at the room where I had been silenced for so long. "You have 16 days left," I said quietly. "Use them wisely." The silence that followed was more deafening than any The moving truck's rumble echoed down the quiet street like a drumbeat of finality. I stood on the front porch, arms folded, watching men in overalls carry out the last remnants of Robert's life in this house. His workshop tools clanged as they were loaded, the sound metallic and hollow. He had left 3 hours earlier without a goodbye, driving his pickup as if fleeing from the weight of defeat. Lisa had gone the night before, her 2 SUVs stuffed with clothes and boxes. Katie sullen in the back seat, crying in bursts that seemed half for show and half genuine grief. Neighbors gathered discreetly, watching from their lawns, curiosity mingled with judgment. For 43 years, they had known us as a couple. Robert, the man of the house, Dorothy, the quiet wife. Now they witnessed a reversal few could have predicted. Lisa made a final scene as she left, shouting across the yard that I had destroyed our family, while Katie sobbed into her sleeve. I did not argue, did not rise to her bait. I simply stood on the porch, the rightful sentinel of a home that had always been mine. Inside, silence spread like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. No television blaring sports channels to drown out conversation. No Lisa's voice echoing down the hallway dictating her plans. No clatter of Katie's devices. Only the creak of floorboards and the ticking of the grandfather clock Robert had insisted on keeping. For the first time, I heard my house breathe. For the first time, I breathed with it. Yet that peace carried edges sharp as glass. Alone, I was free, but also undeniably solitary. The mini twist struck when Mr. Blackwood arrived with a folder of receipts. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, settling into the armchair that had once belonged to Robert. "Every attempt to contest your ownership has failed, but you should be aware. Lisa filed a claim for residency based on family obligation. It was dismissed. However, she may try other routes. You should be prepared." His words pierced the fragile calm I had built in those first hours of solitude. The battle was won, but the war stretched long ahead. After he left, I walked through each room deliberately, almost ceremonially. Slightly. It was absurd. After 43 years, I was only now the sole keeper of my own doors. The locksmith smiled. "Feels good, doesn't it?" I nodded, though words couldn't capture the storm inside me. Relief and grief were twins, indistinguishable in that moment. Later, I spread paint swatches across the dining table, colors I had been forbidden to choose before. Warm yellow, ocean blue, deep green. I let my fingers linger on each one, imagining walls reborn under my brush. But as I planned, the phone on the counter buzzed. Robert's number, then Lisa's, then Michael's from Seattle. I ignored them all, but unease crept in. They weren't calling to apologize. They were calling because silence scared them. Silence meant I was no longer under their control. Night settled heavy, and the house felt too large, too empty. I sat in the master bedroom, staring at the quilt I had stitched years ago. The one Robert had always said was too busy. The quiet was thick, pressing against my chest. Freedom was intoxicating, but it was also lonely. I wondered if solitude was the price of dignity, and if so, was I strong enough to pay it? My father's letter whispered from the drawer, "You must choose respect over comfort." I clung to those words as the dark pressed in. Then came the cliffhanger I had not expected. At midnight, as I checked the locks one last time, headlights swept across the driveway. A black sedan rolled to a stop. My heart stuttered. Slowly, I drew back the curtain. Robert stepped out, his silhouette familiar yet foreign against the beam of the porch light. He didn't knock. He simply stood there, staring at the door he no longer had the right to open. And in that silence, a chill ran down my spine. Had he come to beg? To threaten? or to reclaim what the law had taken from him. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, yet I woke with unease lingering in my chest. The image of Robert standing silently in the driveway haunted me. He hadn't knocked, hadn't spoken, just lingered like a shadow of the past. By dawn, the sedan was gone, leaving tire marks on the beige Robert had chosen, but also the years of compromise I had allowed. When the walls gleamed with new color, I stood back and whispered, "This is mine." It was not a boast, but a promise. To myself, to the woman I had buried beneath silence. My dignity was no longer negotiable. Still, the paintbrush trembled in my hand, not from fatigue, but from the ache of knowing family bonds had frayed beyond repair. The phone rang again. Michael's number lit the screen. This time I answered. His voice was taut. "Mom, Lisa says you've gone too far. Dad says you've ruined everything. Katie, she's confused." I let him finish, then said evenly, "Michael, for years you believed I couldn't understand finances, decisions, or my own life. Now you see that wasn't true. I am not erasing family. I am reclaiming myself. If Katie wants to visit me with respect, my door is open. If you wish to know me beyond your father's shadow, I am here. But I won't sign away my dignity for anyone." There was silence on the line. Then, softer than I expected, he whispered, "I think I finally understand, Mom." It was not absolution, not repair, but it was a beginning, one I had never thought possible. When we hung up, I felt both the sting of loss and the spark of hope. Family might return one day, not to control, but to connect. Until then, I would live on my terms. Weeks later, the house bloomed with colors I had chosen. A garden expanded into shapes my parents would have loved, and a new office filled with textbooks from courses I had enrolled in. At 71, I was studying real estate law and financial planning. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Knowledge was no longer forbidden ground. It was fertile soil. I discovered that beginnings can sprout even from the ashes of betrayal. Sometimes, late at night, the loneliness pressed hard. I missed the noise, even if it was cruel. But when I sat on the porch watching sunsets paint the sky, I felt something stronger than longing. I felt ownership of my home, my choices, my life. And in that ownership, I found a peace that silence had never given. Ever faced a moment when silence threatened to erase you? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your stories. If this journey moved you, consider subscribing for more dramas that reflect the hidden truths of family life. Like, comment, and share to keep these conversations alive. And join me next time as we uncover another tale where choices define not only homes, but hearts.